Hello, today we are talking about what do you focus on first when you start a new role in sales operations.
Welcome back to Sales Operations for Small Businesses.
To be honest, it's really difficult to answer because there's a number of things that you could start on, but I was speaking to a client recently who they've been diving into little bits of sales operations from the outskirts over the course of their career because they were an SDR, then they were an SDR manager, and then they were a general sales manager, actually, still of younger people, because generally SDRs, business development reps, sales development reps, they tend to be younger, right? And so they're now moving into a new role, managing sales operations and enablement. And so they're familiar because they've also obviously been on the receiving side. They've managed people, so they can see what the benefits are of making sure people are working in a sort in a correct order, in a most efficient way. And they're really excited about the role, but what they said to me was that it just feels like there seems to be a lot of unstandardized practices, and he just found it really weird. And I thought, yeah, there's going to be a lot of unstandardized practices in a small business. That's because when a business is growing, it's usually filled with a lot of people. Sometimes these people could be replaced, but if you're in a small business like that, people are drawn to it because of its fast pace. That fast pace means there are going to be lots of people in the kitchen doing cooking different kinds of recipes at the same time, and everything just muddles together, right? So there won't be a one set way to do things because people have been just trying to make it work. They know the general things about what you need to do with the sale to get it over the line, and then how to sort out the administration generally, and then how to deliver. But there's no right way of doing things because people have just been doing things. They've just been muddling through because that's what we do. We're creative, right? So by the time a small business then needs somebody to solely manage sales operations, you're basically starting at cleanup. I've never had a client that's gone into a small business and they weren't starting at cleanup. I'm not saying things are extremely messy, but even if you are not the small business's first sales ops person, if you're the second person, at the very least, you still need to go through the same things, just at a different level, which is basically reviewing, studying, observing what's currently happening. You don't go in automatically trying to change things to the way that you know it to be true, because every single company is different. Every single one, even if it's the same industry, people do things differently, and it may seem illogical to you at the time, but they just do. It's just different. So you're observing, you're talking to people. I have a course about how to introduce yourself as a sales operations professional. If that helps you, you can go on salesopseffect.com to see the introduction to that. But after you've had that initial introduction, you basically have to study what the processes are. I would strongly recommend going along to a couple of client calls. A lot of us are working online now, so it's much easier to be on a call to just observe the process of everything rather than actually physically going out to a meeting. So being on a couple of client calls, when you're speaking to each individual person, start to map out what the sales process is in your mind. Because in some cases, it's never been mapped out on paper before at all. If you're lucky, something is there, and it's basically a book that's got dust on it because people aren't really looking at it. But try to find what already exists to see if you can map what's actually happening to it. And if nothing exists, then you're going to have to do the mapping yourself. You're going to have to start yourself to be able to get a skeleton idea about what's happening so that you can then fill it in. Then once you know what the sales stages are or what they're supposed to be, you can start filling that in with detail, again, by asking people who are going through those sales processes What do you do in this stage? Now you'll get an idea about what it's supposed to be. If you're going by like general stages, qualify, develop, propose, win pending, for example, you know what's supposed to be in each of those stages. Qualifying is always obviously going to be the first stage. It's when you're figuring out whether this is a real opportunity or not, whether what you've got, the services or the products that you've got is actually a strategic fit. That's what the salesperson is going to be doing. And obviously along the sales stages is when the deal progresses. You're getting more into the detail. You've developed the proposal after it's been signed off internally that you're going to go for this deal. If people have sign off, that is. You're developing the deal, you've sent off the proposal, there may be some negotiation there, and then you're just simply waiting for a signature. And sometimes waiting for that signature, it could take a couple of days, it could take a couple of hours, it could take a couple of weeks. It really depends on the length of your sales cycle, which we will talk about on another time. But you basically have to map that out. Once you've mapped that out, you've got a frame to start with. Because then you can start asking people, okay, and to be fair, these conversations a lot of the time happen at the same time. They wouldn't necessarily happen separately, but people will tell you what they find difficult in terms of progressing a deal from one stage to another. They will also tell you what they find difficult from handing over a deal that they've won to operations and delivery, right? And that's very, very, very important. Remember, your role is about reducing friction so that we can increase sales. So what you're probably going to end up having to do as well, I'd strongly recommend is creating a RACI model. That's somebody who's responsible, somebody else who's accountable, somebody else who's going to be consulted, and somebody else who's going to be informed. RACI, RACI model. And if you have the different activities that need to be done, then you can have the people across the top or the departments across the top to be able to make it really clear who, for every single last one of these activities, is responsible, who's accountable, who should be consulted, and who should be informed. But that's not the first bit, that's the second bit, because that's the first bridge really that connects the sales team to operations and delivery. And obviously you can do it with marketing and you can do it with finance even, because the invoicing process, that isn't always set in small companies. We're probably going to have to talk about that another time as well. But there's things that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be involved with that you're going to have to be involved with because you run the operations for sales, which means you're involved in everything that sales touches, okay? So start off with your sales stages, then continue to your RACI model all the time, learning and speaking to people and growing in your knowledge. Because the answers to the questions of what do you find difficult, what is working really, really well, will tell you what you need to improve on next. For example, a company that I joined, one of the first things that I needed to do, despite the fact that Salesforce was a mess, was update the products that were in Salesforce because there was like 60. And there wasn't 60 products available. It's just that there were no real permissions on it. So people just kept creating things as they went. And so it just meant that codes weren't matching when it would go to finance and things like that. And that was one of the first things, if not the first thing that I had to do. You wouldn't necessarily think that was the first thing because the sales stages were a mess. They were a joke, in fact. They just were not real. And so were some of the deals. But trying to, if you really don't know where to start, you start with your sales stages. You start by speaking to people. You start by figuring out where their pain points are. And that will tell you what you need to do next. You do not have to go in saying, I'm going to bring in this new software and it's going to be shiny and fix absolutely everything and we're going to get 20 more leads. No, you don't need that. You don't need that. What you actually need to do is deal with the stuff that needs fixing. You do not have the resources of a large company. Even if they try to give you the resources of a large company, you're probably still only one person, or there might be you and somebody else. You need to learn how to prioritize your own stuff. So do not start off by actively making the world harder. Okay? You just need to look at what is there and what are the immediate things that need to be cleaned up. So if the sales stages are the first thing, the RACI model is the second thing, then the third thing would be the maturity model, which is something that I will go into in more detail in the future. And I might even create an example about that actually. But the maturity model is effectively how you expect to progress the maturity of the sales team. Maturity is the nicest way to put it, but it's like increasing the intelligence level, so to speak. That would be the rude way to put it. But if you're starting off with, we need to get people to put information in the system, then that's the basic. That's the basics, because if everybody's just out here running their own different kinds of sales, some people don't have contracts. Yes, that happens in certain places, and things like that, then it's all a mess. So starting from, this is what we need, and getting people to put things into the system, then being able to understand what leading and lagging indicators are. So you're probably, weirdly enough, going to start with lagging indicators because those are more obvious, which is how many deals do we win and how many deals do we lose. And then you'll go into leading indicators, which is how many meetings are we having, how many events are we attending, how many leads are we getting from those events, how many calls we're having. In my experience, it's actually easier to do the lagging indicators first because leading indicators have to get so much approval and be something that can genuinely be measured, which might not seem difficult, but it is. But that's what I mean. It's the maturity level. So you're starting off with putting information in the system, then you're more specific about the information, and then how you're going to use that information to drive database decisions. And then you keep developing, because eventually at the top of the maturity model, you'll end up getting to a point where it just feeds itself. It becomes predictive. So if you started off as a reactive kind of department, you end up developing to be a proactive department, and then a predictive department, one where basically the data tells you things almost before you've even asked for it, so to speak. And because of the CRM systems that we have now, it can. So that is why I recommend that you start with your sales stages, get as much information as you can. That will tell you where you need to go next. People may specifically tell you, your manager may specifically tell you, this is the problem that we've got, in the same way that they told me I need to fix the products. They will tell you. You do not have to do absolutely everything in your first couple of months, because you will burn out. There is no end to the amount of different tasks that you can do in sales operations, so please don't try to do them all. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify, thank you. Please subscribe there as well. And do tune in every Tuesday from the 23rd of May, because we will be having half an hour Q&A sessions online that are free. You can see the link in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you there, and I will see you here next time.